and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about the book of Ruth. No matter what your age is or what season of your life you are in, there are so many lessons to be learned. Let us unfold these lessons as we walk alongside Ruth, Boaz, and Naomi. This book has only 4 chapters. I'm going to unpack each chapter very briefly and then give you 10 powerful lessons from this amazing story. Are you ready? In chapter 1, we find a family in Bethlehem in Israel struggling to survive and find food through a famine. The husband's name is Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their 2 sons. They moved to a land called Moab. Now Moab is an ancient enemy of Israel. In Moab, the father Elimelech dies, and the sons marry 2 Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Soon afterwards, both the sons also die, leaving Naomi alone with her 2 daughters-in-law. Now, there was nothing left for Naomi to stay in Moab for, so she had told her daughters-in-law that she was going back home, and she compelled them to stay behind in their homes because she knew that in Israel it would be very difficult for an unmarried widow to live. Orpah agrees with Naomi, but Ruth shows loyalty to Naomi, and she says, and I quote, in chapter 1 verse 16, Ruth tells Naomi, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Amen. Ruth pledged her loyalty to Naomi, and they set out on their long journey back to Israel. Ruth showed remarkable faith for such a young believer. She believed that there was still a purpose for her, that God still had something planned for her. She had faith to believe that God was who He said He was, and that He would provide for her and her mother-in-law. Chapter 2 begins with Ruth and Naomi discussing where to find food, and it just so happens that it was the beginning of the barley harvest, and so Ruth went out to the fields to pick up grain, and she ended up picking up grain from a relative of Naomi named Boaz. We are told in the Bible that Boaz is a man of noble character. He notices Ruth, he finds out about her story and who she is, and he shows her unbelievable generosity. Boaz is so impressed with Ruth's loyalty to Naomi that he prays God will reward her for her boldness. Amen. When Ruth comes home that day and Naomi finds out that Ruth had met Boaz and that he is their family redeemer, she is thrilled. The phrase family redeemer is an old cultural practice in Israel, where if a man in a family dies and he leaves behind a wife, the redeemer, the family redeemer, has to marry her and protect her and provide for that family. Naomi begins to hope that perhaps there is a future for her family. Chapter 3 begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan for Boaz to notice their situation. Ruth stops wearing the clothes of a grieving widow and shows that she is available to be married again. Ruth goes to meet Boaz on the farm at night. She makes her intentions very clear, asking Boaz if he will redeem the family and marry her. Boaz is once again amazed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi and calls her a woman of noble character. Boaz tells Ruth to wait until the next day when he will redeem Naomi and Ruth legally before the town. Chapter 4, it all comes together. It turns out that there is a closer family member than Boaz who is also interested in redeeming the family. But at the last minute, he finds out that he has to marry Ruth, the Moabite, and he declines. Boaz, on the other hand, he knows Ruth's true character, and he acquires the property of Naomi's husband, and he marries Ruth. Just as Ruth was loyal to Naomi's family, so too was Boaz loyal to their family. While Naomi's tragedy led her to think that God was punishing her, God was actually on a mission to restore her. And God accomplishes that restoration through Ruth's loyalty and bravery. The reason why Ruth's actions bring healing to her and Naomi is because of Boaz, a no-nonsense farmer who is full of generosity and loyalty. This book concludes with the genealogy that shows Boaz and Ruth's son Obed is the grandfather of King David, from whom came the lineage of the Messiah. This small story of Ruth shows us that God has a bigger purpose, and it also invites us to consider how God may be working in our lives as well. As promised, here are the 10 powerful lessons that can be learned from the story. Number 1, loss is hard. Number 2, keep your commitments. Ruth says in verse 16, where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Ruth was brave in keeping her commitment to Naomi instead of looking out for her own interests. Number 3, bitterness happens, but God is with you. Number 4, get to work. Ruth was eager to work. As soon as she got to Israel, she said, let me get into the fields and pick up the grain. And then in verse 7 it says, she's been at it steady ever since, from early morning until now, without so much as a break. And her work ethic did not go unnoticed by Boaz. It caught his attention. Number 5, the man noticed first. Number 6, Boaz had honorable intention. Number 7, Ruth made a move. Number 8, noble character is important. Number 9, he takes